Turn up.
What up? What up? What up? Back, JUCO Hoops Insider. It's been a long time. We're back at it. We get new music every time. Anisha's back in the backstage, executive producing at a high level. I love
She's
it.
just back there spinning
On the ones and twos. Yeah, welcome back, JUCO Hoops Insider. So, yeah, what's been up, man?
Oh, looking at four walls, watching basketball on TV only. The usual.
The usual.
The usual.
Let's talk JUCO. We got some games possibly coming up here pretty soon, man. Let's talk the latest on.
There's games coming in I said something the other day on Twitter that was 10 days, but I think some places, I don't remember when the official start date is. It's like the 23rd maybe or something.
I think it's upcoming week, right? 7 days or something.
Yeah, we're down to 7 or 8 days. I thought it was the 25th, but then I think it's the 23rd. So I've been watching scrimmages and stuff. There's schools. The NJCAA has done a great job with kind of allowing schools to handle their own schedule for scrimmages and whatever. There were some guys that got a lot of it done in the fall. You were allowed 5 actual scrimmage games. Some guys didn't get to do anything in the fall because of COVID, or the schools were just being extra careful, or whatever. But now some guys are starting to scrimmage leading up to it. So been fun watching a few of those and just kind of seeing what happens. It's one of those interesting deals where junior college is going to be weird, because in the NCAA you have all of these super strict requirements for testing, and the leagues are some of them probably a little over the top with some of the requirements and things like that. And junior college is kind of like how junior college basically is I don't know. we're just gonna go out here and Wild West this thing. And which, hey, I mean, it is what it is at this point. So everybody will do everything as safely as they can. It's probably going to be a little easier to be safe with junior college, because when you're going from a town of 3,000 people to a town of 4,000 people and you're doing it on a bus, you're probably less likely to spread stuff around a bunch. But some of the places have had their own issues and teams and all that sort of thing. So we're just basically, everybody that I talk to is hey, we're just gonna get into it and we're just gonna see what happens and
figure out as it goes.
Figure it out as we go.
A lot of places don't have. I mean, obviously NCAA has more money. They have more protocol, more testing. A lot of JUCOs don't have the money for that. So similar to how NAI maybe is done, and even some Division IIs that just don't have the money to test as regularly. You just
the testing is expensive. The testing is super expensive. We for some of our event stuff in the spring that we were looking at, we're gonna be doing some testing, and if we can have the event, who knows? It's kind of one of those okay, plan and then assume nothing, right? But the tests are $175 a pop, and that's because we're getting them in bulk. They're saying that, okay, well, to get this rate, you have to test 150 a day or something. And that's a lot of money, right? So if it's $300 if you're not testing in high volume like that. So that's not feasible, right? For a lot of schools where it's hey, yeah, every game you got to play, it's it's $3,000. Right. Testing. It's
we'll pass on that.
Yeah, hard pass. So
temperature check they'll be doing, and the basic stuff that they can do, but I would think it's going to go a little smoother than maybe what people think. I hope, but it'll be JUCO no matter what.
Flexibility is the key to air power, as my retired Air Force dad always says. I'm I don't know what that means, but sure. But no, you've just basically got to, you have to be flexible. Administration has to have grace and understanding. Like that's something that I've been slamming my head against the wall with for months and months now through this whole thing is, sometimes you'll see me tweet out like how awful adults are. Right. And usually that's because it's somebody in administration, like doing like bad things just because it's there's a rule and it's like, yeah. And there's a pandemic. Like what, were your rules written during a pandemic? There was one, I won't share the details of the interaction. Let's just say it was kind of nasty and kind of, because I'd like to stick my nose in a lot of things and kind of went after it with somebody, and they said, well, this is the rule and this is the way that this is for this student athlete. And I said, okay, I understand. It's a rule. I get it. Now, during the last pandemic, how did the students manage, their way through this rule and things? What do you mean? So, well, the last time that there was a global pandemic where millions of people were dying and everybody was locked in their house and all that sort of stuff, I assume that you applied this rule during that time. She's like, I'm like, exactly. Like there wasn't one. Like, okay, so now that you understand that this is unprecedented, like when we say the word on TV all the time, unprecedented, like this is what they're talking about, right?
Exactly.
And you should have some grace and some understanding and flexibility in how everybody's just trying to survive, right? And if you're grabbing some of these rules and just this is a rule, it's like, all right, go find something else to do, please.
Right.
There's my rant for the morning. Gosh, here we are on January 15th. We're just back from the holidays and I'm all fired up.
I love it. We'll do a real quick shout out to Rising Coaches, very quick, and then we'll get straight to talking some more JUCO hoops. We'll let Brandon retweet from JUCO Advocate, since we did not spell JUCO Advocate right. That's okay. We put an underscore. We'll let him do that real quick, and we'll be right back.
I want to take time to acknowledge one of our partners, Rising Coaches. Every coach wants to rise in their career in one way or another. We're all looking for professional development, access to tools, and relationships that can help us grow and help us advance in our career. Rising Coaches provides just that. You can visit Rising Coaches at www.risingcoaches.com. Their memberships are just $10 a month and provides a genuine community to help you grow and advance in your career.
All right. I don't know if you caught that on your social. We had a little mishap, so we didn't get the retweet for the followers for JUCO Advocates, so they can see it.
Oh, I see what's happening. See, we have multiple devices going at the same time because this is how technology works now.
We do. All right, so let's talk. We can go a little bit. Give us one more kind of synopsis of what you're hearing from guys. Are they excited to finally play games? Do they feel like they actually are going to play games? It looks like more people than not feel like they are, but
I think people feel pretty good about being able to play right now. I think whether they're excited or not is I mean it's like Christmas coming up for these guys. I was talking to a coach yesterday, and he's just like overwhelmed with how excited like everybody is to get on the court and play. Like they played a scrimmage, and you'd have thought he played in a national championship. They're just, and I mean, these guys haven't played a game in almost a year.
Yep.
Right? I mean, Hutch got shut down. Everybody was playing regional tournaments in the beginning of March. So, yeah, we're coming up on a year since they've played a game. At least a real one, and because some guys did scrimmage in the fall. So everybody's super pumped about it. Everybody feels as good as you can. Unfortunately, some places have even this late kind of had to shut it down. New Mexico Junior College called it quits. Monroe up in New York. The Phoenix area schools, pulled some admin adults or whatever stuff, and they were like, we're not going to play, in the late summer. Right. And then I don't know. I mean, call me a conspiracy theorist. I don't care. And then they were like, oh wait, like we really need all that Pell money. and we need all that enrollment and we need all that tuition and stuff. No, we're totally going to play. And then once registration was done and everybody started school and all that kind of stuff, they're like, kidding. No, we're not.
Never mind.
Yeah, never mind. No, we're not going to play. So a few kids were able to transfer out, but there's just available scholarships and stuff like that. So now all of a sudden, all these kids are like just kind of going to school and doing their thing because they didn't have time to transfer anywhere.
Right.
So, it's just, it is what it is. But, so there's still some places that are kind of figuring out here late, and it's some of it's not even because, it's really their choice. It's whether the state that they're in, the political environment that they're dealing with. Some of these schools get a lot of state money. And so the state is kind of like, well, you're going to do this or we're not going to give you any money. And at that point, I mean, money rules everything. So, weird deal. But, a lot of places are going to be able to at least get started playing, and then we're going to see what happens. And actually I'm going to jump ahead on your
go ahead
timeline because this is relevant to it. So, the NCAA tabled some votes on two things: name, image, and likeness, because I guess Mark Emmert forgot to study or something. Is basically the way that he described it. Where he said, "Oh, you know what? There's some complexity to these laws and rules. We need to put things on pause because I haven't been paying attention for 2 years." So it was that, and then there's the immediate transfer stuff. So everybody kind of figured all right, well, this is an easy one. This has been coming. They've been talking about it. They're going to allow this. They're going to whatever. And literally the other day, the NCAA was like, we're going to talk about it later. And so as of right now, they've still not voted on whether or not they're going to allow transfers to be immediately eligible after this COVID year. And that could really mess up a lot of people's recruiting plans. And I say it's relevant to the discussion before because now if JUCO is able to pull off having a season, there's a lot of coaches and programs that have not been paying attention a lick to JUCO because they're just, coach wants to look at one of these transfers, they're all going to be immediately eligible. Well, guess what, Jack? You haven't been doing anything for the last 6 months, and now maybe you're not going to get that immediate eligibility transfer. So now what?
Right. Do you think JUCO is starting later? That almost works in the favor of some of those kids and coaches because they haven't played games yet, so there's not as much buzz around JUCO. Does that kind of benefit the guys that maybe thought they were going to get transfers? What do you think? Yeah,
I mean, there's just nothing moving right now. I was talking to somebody the other day, and they said, well, there's still a lot of JUCO recruiting going on, and I'm like, look, dude. Nathan and I run verbal commits. We own verbal commits. How many tweets you see from Nathan with JUCO offers right now?
None right now.
Nothing's moving. There's still some guys calling. There's some guys that are working really hard. There's some guys that aren't working at all, and that's going to bite them in the butt later. Right. But there could be. This is also crazy. You got all these people not being paid attention to, these JUCO players. They're going to get their year back, right? So now JUCO sophomores that would have 2 years to play, now they're going to have 3.
Right.
And I always tell guys, the difference between 3 to play and 4 to play is nothing, right? Yep. That in this modern transfer world, that doesn't exist. So if you get a JUCO kid with 3 years to play, that's like getting a high school kid.
And 3 is almost better. 3 is almost the ideal because you have a case study. You know how well they can at least do it to some degree. There's way less question marks, way less risk, and you have 3 years to play. You get a whole semester or year to transition, and then 2 more to be really good.
Yeah. So that's a whole group of kids, 3 years to play. Some of them with 4, that are high school qualifiers that are about to tip off their JUCO season. And guys aren't paying attention. What? Because you want to wait on a D1 transfer or whatever. And it's hey, don't get me wrong. There's plenty of really good Division I transfers. There's also plenty that don't piss a drop when they get.
There's plenty that don't always work out. I mean, we were just talking about that on another one of the network broadcast. One of the coaches, matter of fact, from Clemson, they're up to number 12 in the country. They were talking about getting transfers, but also there's different ways to stay old, right? If you can get younger guys in your program and groom them and now they actually know what the fabric and the culture of your program is all about. Those guys, if you look at all around the country, most of the teams that are having success early on is because they had a bunch of returners and guys that were already there and they had continuity. The transfers is plug in, but if you have a team full of them, it makes it hard to figure out how to make it all work.
I mean, I'm sitting here looking at guys like Chris Payton at Indian Hills, Josh Baker at Hutch, Matt McFarland at Colby, like dudes like that are some of the in my opinion top 10 players in the country.
Right.
And they have people calling, and they have a couple offers here and there and things like that, but not necessarily. I don't even know what their offers are, honestly, because it's so just kind of whatever. Right. These are guys that in a normal year would have high majors all over the place, fighting each other to get kids like this. Right. And especially now you're going to give them all 3 to play. Each one of those guys has 3 years to play. Matt McFarland is 6'10", runs like a deer, shot blocker, skilled, can take you off the bounce a little bit if you're not careful. Has a really good mid-range game. He's developing that 3-point game. If that kid walked into an AAU gym,
right,
this summer, and looked like he does and does what he does, he'd be going to Kentucky, right? But now, because he's a JUCO kid at Colby, they're like, oh, I don't know. We're going to see if there's a D1 transfer. That, like, what are you talking about? Like, this kid's going to have 3 years to play.
Right.
And I don't know. It doesn't make any sense to me. Especially now, I spend so much time on Twitter. You know what I've been doing? I've been staring at 4 walls and I've been tweeting about JUCO dudes, right? and so all these kids that I tweet out about, like, okay, here's another kid that had 26 tonight, and here's another kid that had 17 rebounds, and here's, at the Division I level, and everybody's like, oh man, where do you find those JUCO kids? In junior college. That's where you find the JUCO kids that I'm talking about. They're in junior college right now, and you're not looking at them, and you're not paying attention, and you're not calling, and if you are calling, you're not calling with a purpose.
Right. You're
calling because you're like, oh, I want to keep this kid warm in case I don't get whatever. And it's like, put the F. Wow. It's wild. Because again, these are kids that if it was any other year, you'd be fighting over yourselves to get it. And now you got this like D1 thing, and Mark Emmert was literally like
out of the blue, right? Out of the blue.
They had some like goofy Zoom background thing with the, the subtitles going on, and they were like, welcome to our TED Talk. It's like, wait, what's going on? And they're like, it turns out name, image, and likeness is complicated.
Very.
We do our homework.
You're right.
So we're not going to vote on it.
This transfer thing may be harder than what we thought.
Yeah,
I'm surprised this transfer thing, though, because they've given the blanket one for this year, and they've seen how it works. So why not just – and I guess because it's going to be so many guys leaving from so many places, I don't know, but –
and they know it's coming. I mean, they've already acknowledged that it's coming.
Right.
This has been a thing that people have been slamming their heads about for a long time. And they literally, it was almost like they're like trolling right now. First off, I'm not entirely sure why these votes have to be tied together. It's like, oh, this vote. Yeah. And then the next one is not going to happen for 2 months. And it's like, what the crap are you doing for the next 60 days? You could literally just be like, hey, is everybody free on Tuesday? Cool. Like, let's have a meeting and we click the Zoom button, right? Like, what are we talking about? This isn't like everybody has to fly in.
So caught up in the NCAA tournament. They need that to go so well somehow, some way that they don't want to put more on their plate.
That's where it's like, well, then do the easy stuff. Like, just the legislation is not that complicated. It's not that complicated. And I understand name, image, and likeness, and there's some complexity involved with that because of state legislation and federal legislation and the Supreme Court and okay, cool. I mean, it's not like you're the NCAA and you have lawyers coming out of your ears, and this has been going on for 2 years, and maybe you should have gotten this all figured out, before. But sure. It's not like your days have been chewed up with these super important lunches that you normally have to take and things like that, because you're literally also sitting in your house not doing crap either. So, but that aside, separate the transfer stuff from it. Like you're purposely going out of your way to make things obscure, complicated, and unknown for literally thousands of kids.
Yep. And program.
And hundreds of coaches and programs and everything else. And you're just like, I don't know.
But I think the reason why they put them together, and tell me what you think, is they aren't ready to decide, but they're almost getting you ready for another postponement, right? Like it doesn't. You don't normally pause it and then say, okay, we're good now. They're going to do that in another year. So it looks like what we're both saying is that it's not going to happen where transfers are going to be eligible right away this year. It doesn't look like it. Because if you remember last year before the pandemic, they were going to do it then. Then they pushed it back to this year. Then they started the year like, oh, we're ready to do it. And then now they're pushing this pause button, makes it seem like they're not going to do it.
And the BS thing is that you do have a lot of kids that are transferring now, even in mid-semester, and there'll be even more at the end of the year that, maybe this was their first year at their new program, if they were coming from junior college or they were coming from high school. And a lot of those guys had to go through the recruiting process, in March, April timeframe or whatever, without being able to do things like take visits, without, coaches being able to see them during an April live period and things like that. So there were a ton of mistakes that were made.
Right.
There's a ton of mistakes that are going to be made this year. There's a ton of mistakes that are going to be made in the spring. And now if you're
live,
yeah, nobody's seen anything.
Nobody live. You can't go watch anybody play live, which with transfers, you're used to synergy and everything else, but still at least to get a face-to-face feel for the person other than Zoom. Yeah.
And so now, there's going to be a huge amount of transfers and things like that. And if they kick that thing off another year, gross. I mean, just whatever. They're going to end up getting their butts sued is what's going to happen. Somebody's going to have a dad. Somebody's going to have a dad that has nothing else to do and a big law degree. And they're going to say, you know what? We're just going to go to war on this thing.
And probably why they're pushing it off is to avoid some of that. Because eventually what's going to happen too is it's a one-time transfer. What's going to happen is guys are going to be applying for waivers for the two-time transfer.
Right.
So like, when is it going to end? So they have their hands full. Let's talk a little bit about your live period podcast.
Yeah.
Let's talk about the last episode that you had. Oh, let me get this out of the way. Your last episode that you had. And that's a compelling, powerful JUCO story. So let's talk about that one, and then we'll jump in on one other one before we jump to the JUCO Product Player of the Week.
Yeah, it was a good one. It wasn't one that I necessarily. You know what? I take that back. I had thought about doing this back when the 60 Minutes thing came on about human trafficking, and I knew a little bit about Sully's story and things like that. So for those of you who hadn't listened, live period podcast with Thomas Villianco from Villianco Hoops and I. You can get anywhere you get podcasts. So we'd already done an episode. Actually, our second episode ever was about human trafficking. Some of my experiences with it from the things that I do overseas. And then we had Emmanuel EJ, who played at Mississippi Valley State, and is now a GA at Mississippi State. And it was kind of funny. We were like, okay, we're going to make this podcast and we're going to have coaches on and we're going to talk about coach stories and things like that. And it's really evolved into doing lots of different things. But so the first episode was Mark Pope and talking about his program and, a little bit about his story, which is pretty unique and everything. And they were like, second episode, human trafficking. And so we did that, but I really wanted to dive more into the real nuts and bolts of kind of how these things operate. And Suleiman Doumbia from Navarro, who's going to TCU next year, his story is bonkers and incredibly compelling and powerful. And so, yeah, I mean, this kid was bought and sold and moved around to 6-7 different schools or whatever it was, and deported at the border. In Canada and, back to Ivory Coast where he's from, then to Thailand and back over here. And he was caught up in that Evelyn Mack school situation, the lady that went to prison for human trafficking. And it's this unbelievable story. He's a phenomenal freaking kid. He's a great basketball player. He's going to be really good, but he's an even better kid than player. And just, I said in the podcast, like, I can't fathom getting through the things that he got through. Like we were talking before the show about how, it was just like, oh yeah, I went to Africa. Like I didn't know what I was doing. I didn't really know anything that was going on. I had never met the person that had helped arrange it. The first time I met him was in Dar es Salaam. So all the things your mother tells you not to do, I did, but did it in Africa.
Right.
It ended up working out. It was great. It was life-changing stuff, but it was probably a little bit more of a roll of the dice there than I realized at the time. But I can't imagine, like him not speaking much English and coming here, and then all of a sudden, like literal criminals are taking advantage of him and doing all these horrible things, and not feeding him or not taking care of his housing or not, whatever, and like trying to wrap your head around that when your entire perception of what America is completely not true.
Right.
It's not the glimmering city on the hill that you thought it was, and still surviving all of that, and then going through all the other things he had to go through just to get back here after he got deported. Like, it's bonkers. Right. Go check it out if you haven't listened to it yet. Suleiman Doumbia. It's basically me asking him a question and then him talking for an hour. Yep. And it's awesome. He was great. So,
what is that story now? He's going to TCU.
Yep.
He's at Navarro, one of the best JUCO players in the country at Navarro, and an incredible story. And I've been in there to recruit in their gym and just to be around him. And then he played for Basketball University at one point in time as well. They're out of Houston. He was in San Antonio, but got a chance to know him and see him up close. And what a gentle giant, like what a great human being. You can even tell it on the podcast when you listen to him. I mean, just a spirit of just a kid who's been through a lot but hasn't been affected by it. And to his credit, his perseverance. Yeah. Incredible story.
I mean, there's no ego there. There's no nothing. Like, we'll post the video probably later next week of the full episode and stuff. And like, you can see, like, he's getting emotional just talking about it.
Right.
And for him, it's emotion because he's so grateful. Right. Whereas like the rest of us, I'd have been so freaking angry. Like wouldn't have made it through because I'd have put somebody through a wall long before that. Right. Like, and somehow this kid just like kept trucking and kept going and figuring it out. And it's crazy. So
tell the quick story on Gideon. You kind of referred to your trip. Tell the quick story on Gideon, who just had an incredible finish to the game yesterday. Was kind of a difference maker. He was a difference maker down the stretch to help BYU get a win. Yeah. So tell us the quick story.
Yeah. So everybody teases me. Actually, Hank Polona texted me before this and said, like, all right, how much are we going to talk about Gideon? Like the whole episode or just 3/4 of it? And because he knows how much I love Gideon. Like Gideon's like my little brother. And, it's crazy. He, before I tell you the story about, kind of how he got here, he's at BYU and he played a couple minutes here and there, 5, 6, 8 minutes for a few games. And then against St. John's, they had some guys getting some foul trouble. They had some injuries, things like that. And so he got thrown in at the 4, which he's not there to be a 4. He's there to be the 3. And he had something obnoxious, like 13 and 15 or something like that against St. John's. And it was just sheer, like, not knowing what he was doing. It was just sheer effort, right? And kind of won the game with some big plays down the stretch. So I'm all pumped up, and I'm like, oh my gosh, like he's doing great, and he's gonna kill it, and all this kind of thing. And then he like hardly played for the next like 5 or 6 games. And the AAU dad inside of me is like, like what's going on? And the coaching staff just kept saying like, hey, to him and to me, like, be patient. He's here to play the 3. He's learning. We didn't have a summer. He was quarantined and blah 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 blah. There's not a lot of kids that could like really work through that, right? Like he's got this incredible mental toughness. I always joke about him being a robot because he just, whatever you say, whatever, he's okay, yes, and he'll do it. To go from playing 25 minutes and having a huge game like that to not playing, like most guys would have lost their mind. I was losing my mind. He was the one that was calm. And so then against Gonzaga, he has a great game. And, then against St. Mary's last night, he has another great game. And, you can just kind of see that he's taking off in the development curve and things like that. And it's crazy to see, especially when you know where he came from. We went to Owerri in Nigeria and ran a camp. And his brother Samson, who plays at Central Arkansas now, but at the time was at Pitt, had come over years before. He hadn't seen Gideon in 4 or 5 years, and saw me tweet something and reached out to me, and then hit Gideon up and said, "Hey, you need to get on a bus and you need to get to Owiri," because Gideon lived up in the north in a city called Minna, that's 13, 14 hour bus ride away, and so he shows up, and it was chaos from the beginning. And the people that we were doing the camp with ended up being not such great people.
Yep.
And they were charging these kids to play in this thing, which we don't charge kids in America, let alone in Africa.
Right.
And so I lost it, and we had some tense moments. I guess the eyes of our security staff and the eyes of my buddy Shay and David that were with us got real big, because I got real angry. Right. And because we found out that like Gideon and his friends were sleeping outside the walls, because they had given their money to this person that was telling them they had to pay to play in this camp, and didn't tell us. And so when we found that out, fortunately we were able to kind of get everything taken care of. But for a couple nights at least, Gideon and his guys were sleeping outside the wall of this outdoor compound that we were playing in, and cops were chasing them at night and all this kind of crazy stuff. And so that kid went through all of that stuff, went through, just unbelievable things. I mean, he'd been denied a visa like 6-7 times before trying to get over here, and just finally made it through. And he shows up at New Mexico Junior College, wins freshman of the year in the Whack Jack. He had never really played like truly organized basketball before. He'd only been playing like even pickup stuff for a couple of years. And, had a great couple of years at New Mexico Junior College with Luke Adams down there. And now he's at BYU. And it's so crazy. I'm sitting there last night, like watching him on ESPN, on the big screen, like, there's Gideon doing stuff.
Amazing to watch that, I'm sure, for you, and think like, I remember when he was sleeping outside.
Yeah. Yeah. He's wearing, he had all this Washington, I can't remember if he had like the throwback Bullets or if it was the Wizards. It might've been the Wizards. Anyways, all this Washington stuff, because Jonathan Kolo, who runs Time Out for Africa, who's a wonderful human being that does a lot of STEM camp stuff, education thing back in Gideon's hometown of Minna. And then he throws in some basketball stuff here and there. He lives in Washington, D.C. So he would send things back to Minna, and so Gideon would pause on some Washington Wizards stuff, and so that's what he wore the whole time to the camp. And I mean, it's bonkers to think about, not only to know where he came from, but to like have seen it and been there and like really experience, just a sliver of what he had to deal with in his life, and then to see him do this stuff, it doesn't make any sense. Like, you're not supposed to come from where he came from. You're not supposed to have to overcome what he came from. And his story is unique, but not as unique as you would think, because a lot of these kids that we see that come from Africa, like, you don't ever hear, a lot of times you don't hear Suleiman Doumbouya's whole story, right? And that's why we're so happy and proud to tell those stories, and grateful to him for sharing it with us, because we want people to hear that. Like, when you see Joel Embiid playing for the Sixers and accomplishing, like, you don't know what he went through. Taco Fall, you don't know what he really went through. You're like, oh, look at how tall Taco is. And look at, I heard there was some stuff with some school that he went to, and, they kind of had to fight for eligibility. But yeah, look, Taco's doing great.
Yeah, look how good his life is.
And it's like, you don't really truly know like what they went through. And honestly, 99.9% of us would have failed. Like, I don't have the mental toughness to get through the things that they got through. I'd have said screw it long before, whatever. So yeah,
got a heck of a. I just love the fact you keep doing, showing the other side of it. You got another kid that you had on that's a current player, I believe it. College State of Florida was Tom Parks. Mm-hmm. Then you did Duarte, who we'll talk about him in just a little bit. I just love what you're doing with the podcast, because it's a great thing to be able to show light on those type of stories that no one really cares about, especially in America. It's like, oh, we got it good over here. you don't really think about somebody who came from another country.
The stories are bonkers, both domestically and internationally. Like there's unbelievable stories that we get to tell here, but some of these international ones, the Marshall Kearing thing that we did on our the first episode of The Journey, that we'll be doing another one here soon. I was actually going to do just an episode of The Journey with Suleiman, and then when I got to talking to him, I was like, I got to do a full podcast on this.
Right.
But Marshall Kearing, like he's a 100% Aboriginal native from Australia, and I dug around and looked. I could not find, and maybe I just couldn't find it, but I could not find another 100% Aboriginal native player to have ever played Division I basketball. Maybe there was somebody, D2 or whatever, but he'll be he's going to South Alabama. I think he'll be the first. Yep. And, if we talked a little bit about, some of the history and stuff like that, but like the history of the Aboriginal natives in Australia is crazy. Like, Australia is a very complicated history, like when you really dig into it. And so, him kind of overcoming what he overcame. And I don't know if he even fully really understands like what he's accomplished in comparison to what you're supposed to accomplish if you're, Aboriginal like that. And I mean, he's a wonderful freaking kid. He's a great basketball player. And, his story, like to him, he's like, yeah, no, it's cool. Like I came over and I'm going to play basketball, and like, that's neat. And it's like, you literally have hundreds of years of history stacked against you. Right. Like for you to accomplish nothing. And, that like it's when we always say like, everyone's against me. No, literally everyone has been against you for hundreds of years. Like even to today, right? That there's a lot of walls, I guess, that get put up between the natives in Australia and not much different than we do here with our native communities, to prevent them from accomplishing things. And he just was like, I'm going to do it. So what are you going to do about it? And it's awesome. It's great to be able to hear those stories directly from them, to be able to help share those stories. And, I hope when people see kids like this and they don't, maybe know a lot about them, like go dig into it, like go see what you can find, see if there's something out there and really appreciate what you're seeing. Like watching Marshall Kearing accomplish something on the basketball court is fantastic, but it takes on a whole different color spectrum when you really understand who he is and where he came from, and you just can't help but root for those kids. And it's cool. Like it becomes really cool to get to see those guys do things, and you feel I guess more of an emotional attachment to their successes.
And not only that, just to be able to have to go through the JUCO route to do it. I think that's the part about JUCO. You got to love that JUCO provides a space where guys like that may not prove that they're Division I players because they may not have that same opportunity, whether it's Gideon or the gentleman you're talking about from that's going to South Alabama. We got a couple quick questions or comments. We got one. Florida Southwestern in Fort Myers is one of the few schools here in South allowing the public into games to the capacity of 400, according to CDC guys. Games starting next Saturday.
They're one of the few gyms that can fit 1,400 people in still.
Exactly. We got one more from Cabrillo. Pandemic has changed things as JUCOs have different protocols. How would it hurt a player's recruitment that decides to opt out of JUCO because of lack of protocols?
I mean, if you're opting out this year and then going back to JUCO and playing next year, I mean, really the only difference is that you're not going on to a 4-year school this year with that extra year of eligibility, right? You kind of go back to the normal junior college clock. I mean, I'm not here to tell anybody what they should or shouldn't do as far as, opting out, playing, I don't want anybody to feel pressure to do something they don't feel safe or comfortable doing. Right. But just understand that like, if you're going to opt out and things like that, you just need to make sure that you have your head wrapped around, what your process is going to look like. Make sure that everybody is on the same page, right? What you don't want to do is say, hey, I'm going to opt out this year. I'll be back next year. And your coach is like, no, you're not, right. Like, hey, this is junior college. Like these are year-to-year scholarships.
Yep.
there are plenty of people that will not have you back because maybe there's 5 other players waiting in the wings for your spot, and they're like, hey, it is what it is, right, wrong, otherwise, indifferent, it doesn't matter. It's really kind of their choice whether they do it. So, just make sure that you are in communication with everybody. Everybody's on the same page. Everybody's talking about the same stuff, and understands, kind of what needs to happen from here. And so that you don't wind up in a situation where you've opted out, you haven't played all year, and now you're looking for another spot, and you're competing with an entire new class of kids for that spot.
Yep. And the scholarships are so hard to come by right now. So opting out, just make sure that you have an opportunity where you are the next year, like you said, or someplace else, because jumping into the pool or the pod or the ocean of players that are going to be available looking for scholarships, because the high school players right now are just thirsty just to get a shot at any level.
There's going to be a lot of really good high school kids that would, go straight to a 4-year school that are going to have to go to junior college because the opportunity's not there. Yep. And the difference between the 4 years and the junior college stuff is, don't get me wrong, plenty of guys are going to run people off at the 4-year level, but junior college is a little more Wild West, I guess, where it's like, you better be good enough or you're not going to be back.
Right.
Like, there's not a lot of, because the scholarships and the limited resources and things like that, guys have to spend their money wisely, and there's not a lot of programs that can afford to spend money on somebody that's not going to impact winning.
Right. 100%. Well said. Well, we got about 10 minutes left, so let's talk JUCO Player of the Week. You had your first rendition, 300 votes or over 300 votes. Yep. It was a pretty tight race. So talk about all 4 guys, if you don't mind, and then talk about the winner.
Yeah. So started a thing. I kind of wanted to start it around conference. Everybody's playing conference time because I knew the non-conference was going to be chaos and so many games canceled and all that. Like I wanted to make sure that, within reason, as long as people were able to kind of get a couple games in each week. So that's why we started it, the first week of January. So January 4th through 10th was our first week of the hashtag junior JUCO product player of the week. And we'll be doing that every week. And, just kind of talking about guys throughout the week that are having good games and things like that. And eventually going to narrow it down to 4 because Twitter only allows 4 options in the voting thing. I wanted to do 5 and then I realized you can only do 4. So we're going to do 4 because I want this to be a vote thing. Makes it fun, makes it interactive, keeps people paying attention. So I just kind of threw it out there, and we had great feedback. We had a few hundred votes on it. I imagine that'll probably grow as it spreads. And so it was, everybody had played 2 games. Kind of dug through, who had big games here, there, whatever. And so we had Root Manyong from Little Rock, who played at Shelton State and then his freshman year at Eastern Florida. And, he had, he's a shot blocking, rebounding, just long as can be, runs like a deer, big man, and can actually shoot a little bit too. And so he had a great week, a couple really close wins over Louisiana. That was actually one of the games that I don't know if you remember. There was the lights went out, I think, like right at the end or something. And actually, I can't remember if Little Rock won that game or lost that game in overtime or something. But there was like 6 seconds left, and the guy went to go take the shot, and the lights went out. It was like I didn't standing over there, just like. It was weird. It was super weird. But Root had a great couple games there. Then we had Gage Prim from Missouri State, who's a monster. And
Missouri State's playing at a enormously high level, have been undefeated most of the year. They just lost their first game.
Yep, one loss to Northern Iowa.
He was an original D2 player at West Texas A&M before he went to South Plains, and a heck of a time early by the staff and by Jace Harrell. Got to give him a quick shout out. Did a great job, former South Plains assistant, recruiting him.
Yep, yeah, and Gage is, he's everything that you want in a big man, especially in that league. Like he's going to punch you in the face. He's going to take the basketball, and there's not much you can do about it. And so he had a huge week, points, rebounds, just toughness, defense, all that sort of thing. And so And again, they're winning, and they lost to Northern Iowa, I think. Unfortunately, their games this weekend got canceled, I think, because of COVID. So scrambling around trying to help them find a game right now. But so there was Gage, and then we had Amin Adamu from Montana State. And he had a good game the first game against Northern Colorado, but then he had like 36 maybe the next game.
That's not bad.
Yeah, it's all right if you're into that kind of thing. And he just kind of went off, and it was a really close game. It was a great win. He kind of helped, get him over the hump there towards the end. Great kid, British kid that he was part of Dang Camp and played at Casper, and just, he was all over the place. He's hitting shots. He's tough. He's super athletic. He's a phenomenal kid, and so he had a huge week. It was a great win for Montana State there, who has a whole bunch of JUCO kids on that team: Nick Gonzalez and Jabril Bello and some others, and they're doing a great job up there. And so that was a big one, for him to have a game like that. And then our eventual winner of the Player of the Week was, it's no secret. I how much I just love watching Chris Duarte play at Oregon. He came on our podcast and told us his story, originally from the Dominican Republic, and is incorrectly credited with being born in Canada on Wikipedia. It's still on there. Because at the beginning of the podcast, I was like, "So you were born in Montreal?" And he's like, "No, I wasn't." I'm like, "The internet says so."
The internet's always right.
He's like, "I don't know where that came from," but his dad, I think, I can't remember now. It might have been dad.
Where's he from?
His dad's Canadian and moved to Dominican Republic. I think it was dad. I can't remember if it was dad or mom. Anyways, one of them moved to the Dominican Republic. They are from Canada. But Chris was born in the Dominican Republic. Now he does get the Canada still gets to claim like, hey, he's got the Canadian passport. He can play for us in the the Olympics or something. So they're going to hang on to that one. But he kind of identifies himself as Dominican. He's a great freaking kid, and man, is he good. And we all knew, like, watching him at Northwest Florida, it was like, that's maybe an NBA guy.
Yeah, he's different. He's way different. He's definitely he has a chance to be an NBA guy still. He looked like it then, and he still looks like it now.
Yep, still looks like it now.
He's shooting so efficiently. I think I may have put out a tweet the other day just looking at his stats. He was player of the week in Pac-12.
Oh.
He's shooting over 50% from the field as a guard. 52%.
It's not like he's just taking a bunch of inefficient shots and shooting 30% or something. Like, he's incredibly efficient.
Right.
What did he had 52 points or something in the two games.
Yep.
He's averaging 26 points a game. And they had one win, one loss that week. He was a huge piece of that. He's 6'6", he's a 2 guard.
Right.
Like, he can really kind of play all over those guard positions, and especially in the NBA someday where, that'll translate. Like, everything he does pretty much translates. Right. Like he's and it's awesome because he's such an awesome kid too. Like, he's just a cool kid to talk to. He's very humble. He's very, he's incredibly hardworking. And so he ended up winning the vote on our first hashtag JUCO product player of the week, put together a little graphic on it for him. And now I'm excited about
week 2.
Doing it again, and I'm digging through box scores and it, like, as much as I watch junior college basketball, it is really hard for me to remember every junior college.
No doubt.
There's hundreds of them, and I'll look and I'm like, oh, was that a JUCO guy? And I'll look and he played it, whatever. Or I'll just completely blow one, and so I'll get a text from somebody and they're like, hey, you going to talk about so and so? And I'm like, crap, I forgot he went to junior college. So yeah, it's been a lot of fun though, and really just kind of getting to dive into a lot of these names and seeing the successes that so many of these people guys are having. Which again, back to the beginning of this whole thing, is driving me insane. That here I am tweeting out all day, every day about 25 points here and 15 rebounds, 4 blocks, and blah 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 blah.
You're going to recruit the next JUCO guy.
Yeah, I'm like, what is happening right now? You know, everybody's calling me going like, hey, do you know anybody that's going to be transferring? I'm like, get off my phone. Stop it. So
I'm the JUCO advocate, not the transfer advocate. Right.
Yeah.
I think you got to run. We'll be back next week, same time. Do it again. Hopefully, we'll talk about some more JUCO games coming. But yeah, I know you got to run, and we'll be back at it again soon. You know where to find us. Peace.
See ya.